Good morning. Welcome to the United States Sports Academy and our weekly sports talk program. Today we're going to talk about the Final Four very quickly with the women's Final Four. We've also come to call the UConn Invitational, and we'll spend a little bit more time talking about the men's Final Four. With me today is Dr. Brett Simmermacher, our Chair of Sports Coaching, Mr. Ben Billman, almost Dr. Ben, getting really close, one of our doctoral teaching assistants. And today we're really fortunate to have Coach Joe Niland from the University of Mobile, one of our local independent colleges, private schools. There's two private schools in Mobile. There's University of Mobile and Spring Hill College. And Coach Niland is the winningest coach ever at University of Mobile and the second winningest coach ever at Spring Hill. So he brings a lot of coaching experience to this thing. He's actually been to 11 NAIA/NCAA Division II tournaments. So he has that experience from him, and he also went to the Final Four one year in the NAIA, I believe it was 2004.
Right, 2004.
So he knows what it's all about to take a team to the Final Four, and he certainly has a lot of experience taking teams to tournaments. Coach, we want to thank you so much for being here today and talk a little basketball with us. You've probably forgotten more about basketball than the other three of us will ever know, and so we really appreciate your insight. So I guess the first question I'll ask you is, what does your bracket look like these days?
Not very good. Not very good. Except I have North Carolina, so that's my holdout. But after that, I think most people's brackets are busted up. Mm-hmm. And I should have taken South Carolina because one of the guys I worked with for years, Gordon Gibbons, his son Jay is the video coordinator there, and I've known Jay since he was in diapers. And then Frank Martin and I go back from years ago. So, but I just didn't think they were, the way they closed the season, they were going to be this hot. But
Frank Martin seems like I know Charles Barkley said on TV Saturday night, he goes, I'm going to root for South Carolina just because Frank Martin's just a really good dude.
Frank gets a bad rap because he's so hard, on the sidelines and so intense, and he makes that mean face and stuff. But he's really a big teddy bear, and he's a heck of a coach, heck of a defense.
That's pretty obvious. Did you see the special they did on ESPN with him and his family?
No,
his wife said exactly what you just said, the exact same thing. So he's a big old teddy bear, and in fact, both him and his wife made it very clear who the boss was in the house, and it wasn't Coach Martin. We all have pretty much trash brackets at this point. I had Kentucky winning it all. I know Ben had Duke winning it all. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who'd you have at the beginning of the year?
I've switched up so much. I thought I had North Carolina, but I had Kansas.
Well, I did my bracket in pencil, and I have a pretty big eraser, so I could have a perfect bracket if you give me 20 minutes. I thought the Kentucky North Carolina game was a great game. A lot of people before that game were talking about that being the championship game, the de facto championship game, but we all know that's not true. So let's do our weekly UConn update. They're at 111. We said we did an entire show on UConn's women when they were approaching 100, and we said at that time they'd probably be at 113 at the end of the season. Dawn Staley, who's the women's basketball expert on ESPN, said again Monday night when UConn was playing that if they don't lose this year, you can forget about them losing the next 2 years. Coach, we had Ronnie Arrow on 2 weeks ago. Last week we had Coach Arrow on last week, and we asked him this question when it was like 109. But how do you wrap your brain around winning 111 games in a row at any level?
It's really amazing feat. But what a credit to that program and what Gino has done there. But the talent level, and I think some of that, there's a big disparity in talent level on the women's side and women's sports in general. You have a lot of or few elite players, but he's done a terrific job coaching them, but to win that many, not to have a slip up, not to have a bad night. They have a bad night in the game's a 10-point game instead of a 40-point game.
But go ahead.
It'll be interesting here at the Final Four. The Final Four, your best teams are there, and Mississippi State, beat Baylor, and they got the girl out of Birmingham who really was shooting the ball well, and then South Carolina's program is poised to become a real elite program. Maybe it'll be interesting. Of course, Stanford is with Tara Vanderveer has always been an elite program.
You know, one of the interesting things is, you know, we've got a couple real interesting matchups possible on the women's side. You could have Mississippi State, South Carolina, which is obviously two SEC teams, and the other interesting matchup could be UConn and Stanford, which would put Katie Lou Samuelson against her older sister Carly, and also Stanford was the last team to beat UConn. And we were talking about earlier, UCLA, when they had their famous 88-game winning streak, the last game before the winning streak was a loss to Notre Dame, and the game that ended the winning streak was a loss to Notre Dame. And interesting enough, I never really realized until today, but they were on the same date, January 19th, 3 years apart. So wow. UCLA didn't lose a game for 3 years, and they didn't play as many games back then. But no. UConn's getting close. Yeah, the 111 games in a row is just unbelievable.
Coach, I have a question for you. You've got a ton of experience at national tournaments. 3 of the 4 head coaches going into this weekend, this is their first trip with any team. Roy Williams has 9. Is that? I mean, there's a lot of people make a big deal out of that. Is there really that big of a deal, or?
Well, there's certain things that occur, you know, outside the games, and especially the Final Four is now like the Super Bowl.
Sure.
So, you know, you have the distraction of the media, you have the distraction of your families, and this is what people that I found out. My dad worked for the Buffalo Bills during their runs with Super Bowl. That, you know, everybody's worried about their family getting tickets and where they're going to stay and all that, and so, you know, you have to get that all in hand, so they're only focused on the game. Mm-hmm. And but at the same time, you want them to have fun. Now, Roy's been to a lot of Final Fours. He hadn't won a lot of them.
Right. Yeah.
So, but you know, he's got probably the best team going to this one. So I think that's new to all those coaches. That's new to those programs, athletic directors and everybody else. How are they handling that whole part of it, making sure that the kids are enjoying the experience, but there's not a lot of just outside distractions that they can focus on the business. Then the arena. You're playing in a football stadium. Mm-hmm. And I don't think, with the exception of North Carolina that's done it, those other teams I don't think have played where now the court's absolutely in the center.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And you know, there's 72,000 people, and it that could be. And then this is the first, I thought about this on the way over. This is the first game in the Final Four in the West Coast, technically West Coast because the West Coast time zone, since UCLA beat Arkansas in Seattle. We haven't had a Final Four out that way, unfortunately. You know, I enjoyed going to Seattle to the convention. Yeah. And you know, the West Coast team won it. So does that, Gonzaga and Oregon, do they have an advantage over the East Coast team?
For a trip for their fans.
Do you have a question, Sarah?
Yes, we do. Do you think that major D1 programs might reconsider using one-and-done players, considering how only 2 teams have won the NCAA title since 2006, and he cites Kentucky in 2012 and Duke in 2015?
Well, you know, and that's you look at the teams there now. I think there's 2 freshmen in the starting lineup, a couple sophomores, and then the rest are upperclassmen. In small college basketball, the teams that are older win a lot, and it's very hard for freshmen. Now, of course, when you're talking Kentucky, Duke, those freshmen were going to the NBA. You know, there's very few of those guys. So I think, you know, the teams that have the older players, more mature, understand what it takes, understand the whole thing, are definitely going to be more successful in it. I don't think they'll rethink it, because if you can go get a #1 draft pick out of high school, you're going to go get them.
Well, has everybody talked about North Carolina returning to finish the business that they didn't finish last year?
Well, that's why I picked them. Yeah. I picked them because of that experience. And the fact that, I mean, they're missing some guys from last year that were pretty good players. Yeah. But they have, I think, 5 guys back that played, and that experience, and they're very good players, I think is what's gonna put them over the top.
I think Barry's ankle could be an important factor.
It could, yes.
Going forward. You know, we talked about the potential matchups on the women's side. There's also some really interesting potential matchups on the men's side. You mentioned the West Coast factor. You know, we could have a Gonzaga-Oregon championship game, and on the other side of things, we could have a Carolinas championship game with USC and UNC. As Brett mentioned, 3 of the coaches there for the first time. I think any of those 3 coaches, Mark Few, Frank Martin, what's the guy at Oregon? Dana Allman. Any of those guys would be a great story winning their first championship. All just outstanding coaches. If Roy wins, we'll get to see him cry again, like he always does. But obviously a great coach and a great handler of young people. You know, I picked Gonzaga and Kentucky in the championship game, so I guess I'll have to stick with Gonzaga. But I think I agree with you, Coach, that the UNC has the best talent going in. But you know, a lot of these teams have proven in this tournament that the best talent doesn't always win. You know, sometimes it's when you're hot, and we've seen you know, South Carolina as a 7 seed. We've seen seeds lower than that actually win the whole thing. I think wasn't Villanova an 8 when they beat Georgetown in '85?
And UConn was a 7 just a couple of years ago. Right when they beat 2014. Yep.
That was in Dallas.
Yeah.
I was at that. Talk about a small.
Yeah.
I was in the 3rd level, and I had to watch it on the big screen.
Well, I was in the 1st level in the back, but I still watched it.
Yeah.
It was such a great picture.
Yeah.
Coach, I have a personal question for you. For as far as your style of play, or as far as D1 coaches go, is there a coach that you try to model your program after, or is there a coach you study a lot or read a lot, or you know, study their practice plans, game plans more than others that you at the D1 level that you look at more than others?
Well, I've modeled myself after the people I've either played for or worked with, and a lot was the people I worked with. And I mentioned Gordon Gibbons. I worked with Gordon on several different occasions. His son Jay is with Frank Martin at South Carolina. Gordon was very offensive minded. I came from my dad was a coach, very defensive minded background. I worked at University of Tampa with Richard Schmidt, who was an assistant for Terry Holland at Virginia, and then Coach Vanderbilt himself. And Richard was more of a defensive-minded guy. So those 2 guys had a lot of influence, along with my father, on how I coach. And defense has always been first and foremost. That's why I really love Frank and his teams. And of course, Frank was a guy that used to bring his teams to our camp at Florida Southern, and when he was a high school coach. So, you know, that was my influence. And then you pick things up along the way, guys that have worked with me as assistant coaches, and then, you know, when you study film, and now with Synergy, there's this company called Synergy that, you know, almost everybody belongs to in the world. So you're watching games, and it's just different. Like my cousin, John Beeline at Michigan, he's very offensive minded. My brother, who coaches Penn State Barron College, is a very good Division III coach, very offensive minded. They run similar stuff. Matter of fact, I was with the coach at Gannon up in Danville, and he says my brother's like a mad professor with this basketball stuff. So you know, I guess it's who you grow with and stuff. So I've always been more defensive minded.
Speaking of your cousin, did you talk to him about the airplane incident?
No, we text, and I was with his brother last week watching another nephew of ours coach, but it was a scary situation, very scary. And it was more of a scary situation than really ever came out. You know, it's amazing nobody was really hurt. Because it went off literally across the field off the runway.
One of I think it was does Dan Dockage's kid play for Michigan?
Yes.
Yeah, Andrew.
He said he got a text, OMG, plane crash. And so he said, when I talked to him on the phone, the first thing I told him is, you don't bury the lead. The first words in those texts should always be, I'm okay.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
Did you know Bo Clark?
Yeah, know Bo Clark very well.
Bo is a student in my class right now at the United States Sports Academy. He just retired, announced his retirement. 31 years at Flagler College.
Yeah.
And
Bo was a terrific coach and a terrific player, but a lot of people don't know Bo's dad was an unbelievable coach, Torchy Clark, and started at the high school level in Appleton, Wisconsin, and then was a great coach at what became the University of Central Florida.
You got a question?
Yeah, this is related to actually what you were just discussing. What are some of the main principles you use to develop student athletes that come through your program?
Well, I think the first thing we try to do is to develop the discipline aspect of the person, you know, and in college we all know time management is so important, and so, you know, just the way the programs run, where you have to be, when you have to be there, being ready, being prepared, being focused, is some things that we concentrate on. And trying to get them to understand, because that's helpful. Well, a lot of things that are helpful on the court aren't actual techniques, but they're understanding you have responsibilities and you're accountable for things, and that's kind of where we start with, is trying to work that. And it's more difficult today than ever, I think, because there seems to be less structure. They're coming out of less structure, or less demanding structure.
I have a question as well about coaching. We're seeing this offseason, I'm an Indiana Hoosiers fan, and Tom Crean was fired. Dr. Simmermacher has a connection with Mark Gottfried, who was at NC State, and he was let go. Seems that winning now is more important than ever, and there's a lot of pressure on coaches. Do you feel that, or is this a trend that's going to end, or is it just going to keep getting worse and worse with the need to win and the need to be successful at that level?
Well, I don't think it's ever really changed. You know, you can go back and look at, you know, the people that coached Notre Dame football. They were all compared to Newt Rockne, and if you talk to people, Newt Rockne never lost a game. And all those guys, I mean, from Ara Parsegan to Frank Leahy, it all drove them nuts. And Rockne had a great record, but I think he lost some games.
Yeah.
You know, it's Alabama. I mean, you go to Alabama and you would think Bear Bryant's still alive.
Yeah.
And the pressure to be, and people don't realize that in the late 60s, early 70s, Bear had a couple years that were not losing years, but down years that they were on Bear Bryant. And I just think with the media, ESPN, talk radio, blogs, you know, I think the misconception is how easy it is to win. Mm-hmm. And actually, college sports is supposed to be a co-curricular activity. You know, it shouldn't be all about winning. It should be about developing the person. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, there's a lot higher stakes at the four-year schools that are at the Power 5 conferences, the amount of money they spend and the revenue that needs to be generated for a lot of different reasons. So, saying that, and they do get, you know, like at our level, we're basically on teacher salaries. You know, you get up there, if you're making $3 million a year, yeah, I guess it's probably the pressure to win is probably
and
there.
if you get fired, you still get paid.
Yeah.
I'm an Auburn guy, so I remind people, Alabama people regularly, that Coach Dave Marsh won more national championships than Bear Bryant and Nick Saban put together. So we're gonna wrap this thing up with our final predictions. Just for the record, when Coach talks about staying someplace, he just finished his 18th season at University of Mobile, so obviously doing a fine job there. Okay, Ben, we'll start with you. Women's and men's championship game and winner.
My original picks are still in it for the championship for the women. I had UConn and South Carolina, with UConn winning, so I'll stick with that. On the men's side, I think it's got to be Gonzaga and North Carolina, the two #1 seeds, and I'm going to go with Gonzaga. I think Karnowski is going to be tough for both South Carolina and North Carolina to handle, and the way Williams-Goss is playing right now, he's playing phenomenal. And like you said, Barry's ankle could be a big factor depending on what happens in the semifinal against Oregon. If he injures it or tweaks it, will he be ready in 48 hours to play again? That's going to be a big question. So I'm going to go with Gonzaga.
Brett?
I'm going to agree with Ben on the women's side, South Carolina and UConn winning it all. And I'm going to agree with
Go
you.
way out on that limb.
Yeah. I'm also going to agree with you with Gonzaga and North Carolina, but I think North Carolina is just going to be too strong, regardless of whether Barry's healthy or not. I just think they've got more guys inside that they can move around and do different things. Guys coming off the bench. And I know Barry's an important piece of that puzzle, but I just think they'd be able to get by even if he does tweak his ankle. But I think it's going to take a lot for him not to play.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, on the women's side, I actually had UConn and Texas in the championship game, but I'll stick with UConn. In their 111 game winning streak, they've only won 3 games by single digits. I think at the end of the tournament, when they have a 113 game winning streak, they'll still have only had 3 games in single digits. I think they destroy the Mississippi State, and then they destroy Stanford in the championship game. And Katie Lou gets to brag about her older sister. On the men's side, I like Gonzaga and Oregon. I think it's going to be a West Coast final. And I picked Gonzaga to go to the championship game in the beginning, so I'll stick with them to win. And we'll save the best for last. We'll let our real basketball expert make his predictions.
Well, on the girls' side, I think UConn's going to win it all. Now, whether it's South Carolina or Stanford, I don't know. I think either of those
It's a moot point.
be good stories, at least be good build-ups,
Yeah.
because, Stanford and the sisters, but it is a moot point. Now, on the guys, I had Duke playing North Carolina in the championship, so I got knocked out a long time ago. I think Gonzaga's very good offensively. I'm going to go with South Carolina. I think they're going to front Karnowski, keep the ball out of his hands, push him way off the block where he's not going to be a factor if he catches it. And I think they're going to bother them enough. The only thing I'm concerned about is will they score at a high rate. North Carolina will beat Oregon, and then Barry's a question because he has to be healthy. But I think it'll be the Carolinas in the championship game, North Carolina winning it. I hope it's not a West Coast game because everybody will go to sleep early and CBS will lose money.
It's kind of interesting. We all talk about South Carolina and defense and can they score enough. They scored 64 points in the second half against Duke, which was phenomenal. I think it'll be fun either way. So we hope everybody enjoys basketball. Sarah has our weekly This Day in Sports highlight.
History, yeah. In 1976, Indiana beats Michigan 86-68 to win the national championship and complete a 32-0 season.
42 years ago?
41.
41, the last team to go undefeated. I actually saw them play Alabama and Marquette in the Southeast region. That was the last year that they actually did regions. I'm sorry, the Mid-East region. You had East, Mid-East, Midwest, and West. And then they didn't do seedings. Yeah, you had Indiana obviously was number 1, Marquette was number 2, and Alabama was either 4 or 5. So you had 3 of the top 5 teams in the same region because it was pure geographic regions. And actually was fortunate enough to see 2 national championship teams because Marquette won it in '77 with the exact same players. So everybody. Put your brackets away. They've been done for a long time, and just enjoy the games this weekend. Remember that the women's this year for the first time are going on Friday and Sunday instead of Sunday and Tuesday. So we have women's semifinals on Friday, men's semifinals on Saturday, women's championship on Sunday, men's championship on Monday. So 2, 4, 6 really good basketball games this weekend. Baseball is getting close, and next week will be the Masters. So a great time to be a sports fan. We hope everybody has a great week in sports. Coach, we want to thank you so much for coming here and joining us today and lending your expertise to our program. We really appreciate it. And we hope everybody has a great week in sports. We'll see you next Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Central Time from the campus of the United States Sports Academy.